was the woman. The man was the woman. Oh, the man was the woman. But the woman was the man to want her.
Old and in the Way Sisters. Laugh and learn with me, Janet.
And me, Nancy. The Bitchin' Sisters.
As we tell it like it is. The way it was back then and the mess we're in now.
We're growing old in a new world with skyrocketing costs, crazy fashions, changing norms, and I hate to remind you, with limited time left,
Yeah.
we've got some practical ideas that might work for you.
And we definitely have some opinions that you might have too.
We'll entertain you and inform you. Let's look back at how it was and ahead to what's coming.
And if you're young, maybe you can learn something from your elders. Supposedly we're wise, but we've definitely been there and done that. My husband says there's always a connection.
What's that mean?
Well, he thinks that life should be interactive. It's impossible to go anywhere with him and not have an instance when he greets some stranger, shares up the sort of conversation that you might have with an old friend, not how's the weather or anything like that, and often, much later, declares that he can't wait to see that stranger again.
Huh. There are people like that.
Yeah.
I know someone.
Okay.
You and I are not that type.
No, I am not that type. We were taught, because we grew up in the East Coast, do not talk to strangers. Do not look at strangers. Never look at them and smile. That's what I was taught. But with Mark, this happens so often that, as our 7-year-old great-grandson says, when Mark lingers in the grocery store, he says, "You know what he's like." Because he's talking to someone. He goes in for one thing and he comes out, 20 minutes later.
Yeah. I have a friend who is like that, Dave, and we can never find him. And I keep saying, I can take my GPS for my cat and put it in his pocket so that we can find him. He's always chatting with all these strangers, and they love him.
Yeah, they pretty much love Mark too. But he, just a little while ago, we were walking out on the old 131 trail on the Kickapoo Valley Reserve, which is just way out in the country, and we had our little dog, Pippi, with us. And when we parked, we saw one other vehicle, kind of a newer, well-maintained truck with Airborne and other military decals. Now, you never know whom you'll meet on the trail. Just for the record, in 20 years, I've never had an unpleasant encounter out there.
Uh-oh.
Well,
What's going to happen?
No. Turned out the biker was Mark's new best friend, Gary. Well, after this encounter anyway, he was biking along on a beautiful bike. He was trim, tanned, flowing white hair. Well, okay, he was old. A neat-looking shirt and a hat with military logos. Mark was wearing his Taco Cat t-shirt. Taco Cat, spelled backwards, is Taco Cat. So they didn't look, that similar. Mark had his usual mischievous glint in his eye. He had a beard and a ponytail, and a tiny, fluffy dog was leading him. I was nondescript in my usual gray costume.
Well, you weren't expecting anyone.
No, I wasn't expecting it. We'd seen the military guy before on the trail.
Oh.
And this time we stopped to chat. It turns out he had a barky little rat terrier at home. He said he remembered Mark from the health club that they had both belonged to like 15 years before that. After the fitness place closed, he tried another fitness club, but he said it was like a Trump rally. That set the tone. So half an hour later, he knew our life story more or less, and we heard some interesting things from Gary. Vietnam had been his big teacher. He was a parachuter. He was deployed to guard James Meredith, the first African American to attend the then white-only University of Mississippi in 1962.
Wow.
They threw bottles and spit at us, he said. This is what we find out walking along out in the middle of nowhere with a guy that looks like the last person on earth.
That you probably would have walked
Yeah,
past.
I would have said, nice day, or how's the weather?
And it all started about the dogs. That's how
Yeah,
it started.
yeah, it just started. So, then Mark, Gary told us that he was in the same unit as Jimi Hendrix. Well, then Mark told Gary about the 3 Hendrix concerts he had been to. And because he's so unwilling to share this just out of nowhere, I was the one who mentioned that Mark had actually met Hendrix and partied together. So Gary and Mark were off.
Sure.
Gary detests that TV works to make a person feel inadequate if they don't own or use whatever is being hawked. We found that out.
Oh.
We guiltily admitted that we had actually appeared on QVC selling our homemade candles.
That you,
Yeah.
is that the product that you photographed at my house one time?
Could be. I think I can remember back that far. But it went on and on. I mean, I was beginning to look around for a place where I could pee out in the middle of nowhere. But really, if I had been alone and seen Gary, hi, nice day.
Yeah.
But somehow Mark just draws them in.
He
And he
makes a
finds
connection.
connections. And he makes friends. I think it's a gift.
Oh, of course it is. I know that for me to have done that, I couldn't do it.
It just wouldn't go anywhere if I tried it.
And I've thought about this in earnest. In fact, I was reading a book by David Brooks on NPR on Friday nights. He does commentary, and he used to work for the Washington Post. And he wrote a book called How to Know a Person. And I read it because when I was listening to him on a Smirkanish show, he was saying, in order to know a person, you have to ask them questions that are meaningful. You can't just say, how's the weather, or how's it going? Like, oftentimes that doesn't do it. But so I got some ideas from him. And I haven't met a stranger in the last week, so I haven't used them yet. But if you're at a conference, for instance, you could say, what brings you to the conference? Or are you from here, or wherever they say they're from? What was it like growing up? And you never know what kind of a connection you'll make. And so I was reading the book and lying in bed, and my other half, Mike, was next to me, and I thought I'd try one out. And I said, when was the last time you were out past 11 p.m.? And Mike looked at me and he said, don't you remember we went to Christmas Mass together? And I said, oh, you're Catholic.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it takes, Mark has the sentences. He has the dog. He has
It
what
doesn't
it
matter.
takes.
He comes
Maybe
up.
it's because we're women and we're more reticent. I don't know. And Dave, our Fred, he's just a natural talker.
Yeah. I've tried to do what you said. I didn't read the same book, but, the idea of try to ask a meaningful question. So there was one of our grandsons had a new girlfriend, and we didn't know her at all. And when we met, he brought her home for dinner at our house. And I said, well, tell me something about yourself.
Okay.
I thought, okay, that was going to do it.
Yeah.
And she just began and she just let it all out, that she'd had this really, really difficult life, that one of her parents had been an addict and was probably on the street right now, and she'd had this incredible upbringing. And I was just flabbergasted because I thought, oh my God, I never dreamed
You would get
that
an
I would
answer
get
like that.
anything like that. And I felt bad. On the other hand, I thought, wow, she's really telling me about herself, not just, oh, my star sign and, my favorite color and,
Sure.
that kind of thing. So it started out a relationship, and I really, really like her. And by asking just that one question, I got way more than I thought I was going to get. Okay, so did you start out with Mike by saying, nice weather we're having? Or should I even use his name? Your other half, I think it's out of the bag now.
Yeah. No, we had a common hobby, which was motorcycle riding, and I met him on a motorcycle run, and he had overheard me saying that I was from Sparta, and he came up to me and said, "Huh, you're from Sparta? I've lived there my whole life, and I've never seen you." And I
real
looked at
nice
him.
guy.
Yeah, I know. And I looked at him and said, "Well, I've never seen you either." And I thought that, okay, that's done. And it wasn't until the next day I went to 8 o'clock mass, and all of a sudden some guy, my Mike, turns around and goes, "Hi," and I was like, "What?" And so he kept hanging around outside church because our bikes were there. And I'd take my time talking to people, and when I'd come out there, he'd be, and then we would talk for a little bit, and then we'd go our separate ways. And then about 3 weeks later, the connection was, I looked at him and said, "Well, why don't you come over and check my oil?" I don't know what he thought, but I needed my oil checked on the bike.
I know what we thought, but that's okay.
What about you?
How many years later?
What about you?
I met Mark at a Halloween party. I believe it's maybe 42 years ago. So that's over half my lifetime ago. I had at the time, a collection of vintage clothing, shall we say. So I just, went to my trunk, and that's what I was going to wear to this Halloween party. So it was a pair of fishnet hose and a pair of old kind of high heels. I haven't worn high heels probably for the last 20 years. And a corset, a big pink corset with lacing, and I had this pink fake hair wig. It was really a pillow cover, but that's what I was wearing.
Wow.
And somehow...
You didn't have a line of men waiting to meet you?
There was one other guy, and Mark didn't act all that interested. He was dressed as a duck.
A duck?
He had a yellow union suit, a union suit dyed yellow, and a big, his sister had sewn for him this head, this ugly big fabric head with a big fabric beak on it. I mean, it was ridiculous.
And you were immediately attracted to him?
No, I thought, it takes a lot of chutzpah to dress as a duck.
Yes.
What is it about this guy? And
did you use one of your potty mouth words?
no. But we talked, and I thought...
And he quacked away.
Yeah. And actually, it wasn't till, let's see, that would have been Halloween.
Wait, could you see his face?
No, I mean, he took the mask off eventually. I was disappointed, but I thought I'll try to overlook this. But, yeah, it was actually a couple months later that he called and invited me to come over and see him.
And you were worried what he was wearing?
Yeah. Nope. But that's how it all started, was just a chance meeting.
A connection.
At a Halloween party and 42 years later, we know when we can celebrate our years together, it's Halloween. But it all began there because we had a connection.
Yeah. Janet and I come to you twice a month with new episodes. Some are funny, some are serious, some are just our crazy opinions. I hope you enjoyed our show.
Me too. It's been a pleasure. We are Nancy and Janet,
The Bitchin' Sisters.
The man was the woman.
Music by Hall and Sidnor.